90 minutes. That's how long it took to cross 7 miles of canyon and ridge and start dropping embers into a town. 6:20 in the morning, November 8th, 2018. By 7:30 it had burned into a community 4 miles out. At 7:49, the first spot fires were documented landing in the next town over. The fire front came in 40 minutes behind them. Finding number 11 in their words. The fire traveled and spotted more than 7 miles downwind of the origin to reach Paradise in less than an hour and a half. 6:20 to 7:49, 89 minutes. Those aren't numbers from a documentary. They're findings, numbered, in a federal technical note. 40,000 people left that day. 18,000 buildings didn't survive it. 85 people didn't either. And here's the piece of that morning I can't put down. For a large part of those 90 minutes, a large part of that town was still inside. Not because nobody warned them. Not because they didn't believe it. Because of what a person does in the space between hearing something and moving. Look out your living room window for a second. That glass is the only warning most people ever really get. Now here's the uncomfortable question, and it's the one this whole thing turns on. How fast the fire moves isn't yours. It never was. That number belongs to wind and fuel and terrain. There's exactly one number in that morning that belonged to the people inside those houses. And almost nobody in this country has ever measured theirs. An evacuation has 3 clocks running at the same time. Households only ever think about one of them. There's the hazards clock, how fast it's coming. You just saw that one. 7 miles, 90 minutes. There's the roads clock, how long the drive takes once you're actually on it. And sitting between those two, there's a third one. It has a name, an official definition, and almost no public life at all. It's in the summary of that same report. I'll read the line exactly as written. Pre-movement time, for tasks including decision-making, preparation, and packing. That's the interval. Deciding, getting ready, packing. It is the only one of the 3 that happens entirely inside your house. It's the only one you control from end to end. And it is the only one nobody has ever put a stopwatch on. If you've been through one of these and replayed it afterward, wondering why it took so long to get moving, this next part is for you. You weren't slow. You were deciding. And nobody in your entire life ever told you that deciding is part of the timeline. That's not an excuse. It's a location. You can't shorten something you didn't know was there. Now, the report doesn't give an average. There is no published figure for what a typical American household burns in pre-movement time. I went looking for one. It isn't there. Which is exactly why yours has to be measured instead of guessed. So let's walk it. Not minute by numbered minute, because nobody has that data and I'm not going to invent it. We'll walk it station by station. There are 3 of them. And the last one is where the whole thing gets decided. Station 1. Something happens. A phone. A smell. A neighbor at the fence. A color in the sky that isn't right for the hour. And the first thing almost every human being does is not leave. It's check. Call somebody. Refresh a page. Step out onto the porch and look east. That behavior isn't stupidity and it isn't denial. It's a reasonable response to a life full of alerts that turned out to be nothing. But it eats the front of the clock, and it eats it invisibly, because checking feels like doing something. It has a name in the research, and the name is almost insultingly plain. They call it milling. Standing around gathering information while the situation develops without you. And there's a finding in that literature that I did not expect the first time I read it. You'd assume a short, sharp warning gets people moving fastest. Get out. 2 words. It's the opposite. Longer, more complete warning messages made people less likely to go looking for confirmation, which shortened the delay before they acted. People don't mill because the message was too long. They mill because it left something unanswered. Remember that, because at the end of this, it turns into the most useful thing here. Here's the belief that makes it expensive. Almost everyone carries some version of it. I'll know when it's for real. In that town, on that morning, there were no emergency sirens. Not one. Notification went out by knocking on doors, by loudspeakers mounted on vehicles, by an automated call system, and by social media. 8 rounds of automated calls went out between 7:57 and 9:30. They were aimed at nearly 21,000 registered phone numbers. Read that carefully. Aimed at. Attempting to reach. That's the language in the report, and it's honest language. A registered number is not a person. A call placed is not a call answered. And that town wasn't unprepared. That's the part that changed how I think about all of this. They had a written evacuation plan, zones, routes, traffic direction, lane reversals. Over 100 first responders had trained on it 2 years earlier. The researchers say that training built real muscle memory and that it made the response faster on the day. So the plan was good. Hold that thought. I'm coming back to it at the end, and it doesn't go where you think it goes. Because the report also lays out something a lot less comfortable. For the first hour, the fire was ahead of the notification. Then, for about 70 minutes, notification and fire were arriving at roughly the same time. Only after 8:40 did the warnings start getting genuinely ahead of the flames. And that is not a failure by anybody. It's arithmetic. Somebody has to assess the situation. Somebody has to decide an order is needed. That decision has to travel through a chain of agencies. Then it has to reach the public. Every one of those steps has a floor. None of them can be compressed to zero. Not in that county. Not in yours. Which puts the whole question back on your side of the front door where it's been the entire time. Station 2, you've decided. Now you're gathering. And this is where I'd bet against almost every plan I have ever been shown. Because people build their plan around the wrong question. They ask, what would I grab? Everyone can answer that. Documents, medication, photographs, the dog. It takes 4 seconds and it feels like planning. What isn't in that answer is where each of those things is sitting right now, or who is getting it, or in what order. Close your eyes and walk to whatever drawer holds your documents. Did you count the steps? Nobody counts the steps. The medicine shelf is the longest stop in almost every house I've timed, not because there's a lot of it, because it lives in 3 different rooms. Part of it is cold. One bottle actually matters. And the person who knows the list is currently busy doing something else. Then there's the folder nobody can ever find. Deed, policy numbers, the title to the truck, the birth certificates. Almost every house in America has those 4 things in 4 different places. And one of them is in a bank box that's closed at 5. That's not a packing problem. That's 20 minutes of a Saturday, done once, that you will never spend again. Then there are the animals. And animals do not read the room. A cat that has never once refused a carrier will refuse the carrier on the one morning it counts. Every person I've talked to who has done this for real brings up the animal, and nobody's written plan mentions it. And there's one more movement. It shows up in nearly every real account of this, and in nearly 0 written plans. Somebody's in the car. Somebody remembers something. The door opens again. That trip costs far more than the walking. It restarts the decision for everybody who was already sitting still. 2 minutes of one person becomes 7 minutes of household. Now hold that picture. A family gathering, doing everything right, moving as fast as reasonable people move. Because in that town, those minutes were not being spent against a fire. They were being spent against a road, and the road was changing. 31 temporary refuge areas ended up being improvised that day. Parking lots, stretches of roadway, buildings. 18 locations had been designated in advance for exactly that purpose. 4 of them got used. Somewhere between 1,200 and 2,100 people spent part of that day in one, waiting for a road to open again. Those people had left. They were in their cars. They'd done the hard part, and they still weren't out. Station 3, and this is the one that turns minutes into hours. Here's the belief. It's the most common one in this entire subject, and it sounds like competence. I'll just take the road. The road is not a constant. It's a shared resource, and it degrades under exactly the conditions that made everybody want it at the same moment. That town had 4 ways out, 4 arteries for 40,000 people. Between 8 in the morning and 2:15, 2 or more of those 4 were closed at the same time. For 68% of that window, 68%. That isn't a bad hour, that's most of the day. Over 230 abandoned vehicles were later documented on the main routes out. Almost 60% of them had burned. Some of those cars blocked roads for hours after the people in them were gone. People ran. In some cases about 2 miles on foot to reach somewhere less exposed. Some of them got into a stranger's car. Hold that image for 3 seconds. An engine running and nothing moving. And now the sentence from that report that I think about more than any other. In many cases, minutes made the difference between getting out early or getting stuck in traffic for hours. Read it again with the third clock in your head. Minutes. Not preparation, not equipment. Minutes. Some people drove out under normal traffic conditions. Others were on the road 10 hours or more. Same town, same fire, same 4 roads. The variable was when the car started moving. Routes that take 25 minutes on an ordinary day took several hours that day, when they were passable at all. The majority of that town's evacuation took place between 8 in the morning and 2:15 in the afternoon, 6 hours of a town leaving. And the fire had needed 90 minutes to get there. Think about what 6 hours in a car does to a person who takes a medication at noon. Or to a 70-year-old with a hip that doesn't like sitting still. The drive isn't neutral. It has its own cost, and the cost goes up the later you start it. So the honest version of this subject isn't how much gear is in your trunk. It's whether your household turns a decision into movement in 5 minutes or in 35. There's an order to all of this. What gets decided first? What gets carried? Who moves where? And order is the one thing in here that nobody holds in their head on the day. That's why mine is written down. It's the Survival Systems Preparedness Bundle. $27 at martinkellen.shop. The QR code on screen goes straight there. Links in the description and in the first comment if you're listening to this with the screen off. That's the whole pitch. Now, the objection I get every single time I talk about this, and it's a fair one. That's a wildfire. I don't live anywhere near trees like that. Fair enough. So let's leave the canyon entirely and go stand in your living room. Fire researchers at UL ran this same room 4 separate times. Same size, 12 feet by 12. Same lit candle on the same sofa. One room furnished the way a house was furnished in the 1970s. Natural materials. The other furnished the way your house is furnished right now. The 70s room reached flashover, the moment a whole room ignites at once, at 29 minutes and 30 seconds. The modern room did it in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and they kept running it. The natural room passed 30 minutes in 3 of the 4 tries. The synthetic room went to flashover between 3:20 and 4:50, every single time. 29 minutes of thinking time, replaced by under 4. Same square footage, same candle on the same sofa, and nobody in either room doing a single thing wrong. Your furniture got faster. Your decision-making did not. And it isn't only fire. The National Weather Service puts the 30-year average for flash flood deaths in this country at 127 a year. A little more than half of those happen inside vehicles. Sit with that one for a moment. More than half of the people who die in flash floods have already left the house. Leaving isn't the safe part. Leaving early is. Which brings us to the only thing here that actually shortens the third clock. It isn't a product, and it isn't a purchase. It's one night. Pre-movement time is made of decisions. So you move the decisions out of the emergency and into a Tuesday. 4 questions, out loud with whoever else lives in the house. Written down, not remembered. 1. Where are we going? The actual address, not somewhere. Households stall on that one longer than on anything else on the list. 2. Who is responsible for whom? Every person and every animal, named next to a name. No shared responsibility, because shared responsibility is how somebody ends up standing alone in a hallway. 3. What leaves the house, and where does each of those things live tonight? If the answer is upstairs somewhere, you just found 4 minutes. 4. What is the trigger? Not if it gets bad. A specific, observable thing that ends the debate the moment it happens. That 4th one is the whole game. A trigger you set in advance replaces the checking, the calling, and the standing on the porch looking east. And notice what the trigger actually does. It's the milling finding turned inward. A complete answer decided in advance is what stops you from going to look for one. There's a 5th question I'd add if your household has 2 drivers and 2 vehicles. Which car, and does the second one leave at all? 2 cars doubles your capacity and doubles the number of things that have to go right. Most families should take one. Decide that now, not in the driveway. Then, once a year, on a date you pick right now, you run it. With a clock. Not a drill with sirens. Nobody has to leave the driveway. Everyone stands where they'd actually be standing. And you time it from, we're going, to the car actually rolling. Write down 2 numbers. What it took. What surprised you. That's the entire ongoing program. 1 evening a year and 2 numbers. The first number is usually ugly. That isn't failure. That's the measurement finally existing. And every single thing you fix afterward costs you nothing at all. I told you I'd come back to that town's plan. It was a good plan. Zones, routes, lane reversals, agencies that had trained together. The rehearsal in 2016 genuinely worked. But look at who rehearsed. Public Works, police, fire, over 100 first responders. The professional half of that morning had been practiced. The household half had not. Not there, not here, not in my house either until I sat down and did it. That isn't a criticism of anybody. Nobody ever handed us that assignment. Think about whoever is on the other side of your house right now and what they would do first. If you don't know the answer, that's the gap. And it's the cheapest gap in this entire subject to close. 7 miles in 90 minutes was never the part anyone could change. 40 feet of hallway is. Nobody leaves late on purpose. People leave late because the deciding hadn't been done yet. So do the deciding on a night when nothing is happening. That's the whole thing.